Hi, everybody. I'm Patty Cesarini, and today I'm sitting down with Oakland University's athletic director, Steve Waterfield. Steve, it feels like forever since we were trying to plan this interview, get something in the books, and I don't know how you're feeling, but I am geeked for this interview. I'm excited for this.
This is going to be fun.
This is going to be a lot of fun.
Done, schedules aligned, we're ready to go.
Yes, and we're going to talk all things, athletic director, transfer portal, NIL deals. I mean, anything in the realm of you doing you, like you being you. So first I want to kick it off with, just being an athletic director. And I looked up a list it came from Ohio University, and it was very broad, overarching topics of what it's like to be an athletic director and things that you have to deal with. And, one was addressing legal issues, managing risk, marketing programs and events, budgeting, hiring, and scheduling. Do you feel like this is a good list, or are they missing some things out?
It hits on the topics, but
right.
You never know.
Yeah.
You never know. I mean, that's basically what you're going to be doing. But I always tell people all the time, and it's what people told me when I got this job, is I can't tell you what it's going to be like until you do it.
Yeah.
And I think it's like that with a lot of jobs.
Sure.
You got the budget, you got risk, you've got PR, you've got marketing. You go through it all, but each day's different. That's what makes the job fun, though.
Yeah.
It's all a challenge.
Do you feel like your time with law has helped you when it comes to maybe some decision-making processes and in addressing some of those legal issues?
I think it does. I think it helps me. One of the things in law school is it's about issue spotting. I can see where there's an issue. Luckily now, I get to call Boyd Farnham, who is our general counsel at the end, like, hey, Boyd, what do you think? And he can make the final decision.
Yeah.
So I think it does help. I've always thought that when people know that you're an attorney, they just, whether it's right or wrong, they kind of approach things differently.
Yeah.
And it kind of helps either cut through some of the noise to get to the real issue, or just try to figure out, as I talk to our legal affairs office, this is what I want to accomplish. These are some of the risks I think that we have. Help me get there. And they do a great job helping me get there.
So you're in contact with the school's legal offices in that regard?
Yeah, so we do a lot of stuff with legal affairs. Boyd Farnham, our general counsel, vice president for legal affairs, great guy. He's been at the university for 10 plus years. So he is basically the university's attorney. And we reach out to them on contracts, every game contract. He and his staff reviews. Any contract that I sign, I have to get their approval, which makes sense to sign it, which you want to have them do that. And then as you have issues that come up of liability risk, that type of thing, they provide great counsel.
Yeah.
So they are on speed dial.
Like, I got it on my favorites list on my phone.
Yep.
When it comes to, maybe doing some of that hiring and stuff, especially for the athletic department, are you technically an Oakland University hire first and then under the athletic department? Or how does it work?
Yeah, so I mean, Oakland University, you hire that first, and then kind of within athletics, that's the piece of it. But it's all that umbrella is Oakland University,
Gotcha.
and then you kind of fit underneath that. That part. Yeah.
What's going on, behind the curtains on some of these topics? Like when it comes to managing risk, like what kind of risks are we talking about? Or, hiring, you're in the process of hiring 2 new head coaches right now with both the soccer programs, men and women. Just dive into, what's really going on when you peel that back and what that process looks like.
Yeah, the risk piece of it is, okay, how do you get something done, but also take into account, and it's, what's the worst thing that could happen? That kind of thing. Like, whoa,
you're
what's
always
the worst
looking
thing
at worst
that
case
could
scenario.
happen? And you got to realize, okay, that worst thing may be very remote. And to try to I don't think you can ever completely eliminate risk in most situations. How do you mitigate it as much as you can, and then figure out what that path is while making what you're trying to do doable? I mean, you can eliminate risk, but then what you're trying to accomplish is
it's like that risk and reward, right?
It's a good way to put it. And it's like, how do you, and then so coaches or others, hey, we want to do this. Okay, when maybe we can't do it the way you want to do it, but we can do it 95% of the way that you want to do it, and we minimize risk 50%. Well, we're going to do it that way and get feedback from them. And that's where my compliance background, a lot of that with the NCAA rule book, if you've ever seen it, they don't even print it out anymore. It's so big.
It's a thick.
It's a lot there.
Yeah,
it's a thick rule book, and that's after they've deregulated it. And so a lot of it was, this is a rule. You need to follow the rule. But then a lot of it is, how do you manage that inevitable gray area where you're trying to figure out where do you fit and how do you either defend it, mitigate the risk, depending on what the issue is. That helps, but you'll never completely eliminate risk. With coaches, a lot of it's just the risk, hiring risk.
Yeah.
And you can do the background checks, but what I'm doing is I'm going to hire 2 coaches for men's and women's soccer that are going to be interacting with student athletes, the reason why we're here, and then staff and others. And so you got to do as much as you can through background checks, but also through the hiring process, talking to references, just what are they like? How do they react? What's their kind of coaching philosophy? And you hope to get it right.
Yeah,
that's the plan. Yeah. But it's inexact.
Yeah. Do you think, oh, well, you just said it's inexact. I was going to say, does your gut play into any of that too? A gut reaction, a gut feeling. Can you play into that?
I think it does. And I'll say this. I think you don't want to be like, hey, my gut says this is what I'm going to do.
Right, because that's not going to fly with...
That's not going to fly, but I think like the gut instinct, and this goes back to, where I went to undergrad, I was very analytical. So I said, I'm going to score out these final 3 schools, decide where I'm going to go, and had all these things, and 2 were tied. And I ended up going to where I went because my gut instinct kind of said that. And I've taken jobs because my gut instinct said it was the right thing to do. I've not taken jobs. I think it'd be easy to dismiss your gut instinct.
Sure.
I think there's value there. Yeah. And at some point in hiring coaches, I've hired coaches that others, like the committee was maybe I like this coach, and I've said, no, we're going to go with this one.
Going a different route with
because it's ultimately my job and my call at that case. And so I'm going to take the risk, but because I just felt it was the right way to go. And usually it's worked out. It doesn't always work out, no matter how much time and effort and planning you put into it.
Yeah, well, it's just being human too, right? And that's the way it works. Some things work out. Sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, so much of it's the circumstances. They may be great in whatever environment they are in. They come into a different environment and it just doesn't work as well. Or the flip side, maybe they would have done really well in a different environment. So once they get to that different environment, they have even more success. And so you do your best. Obviously, my whole thing is you hire good people, let them do their job.
Yeah.
So how do I, in a hiring process, hire a good person who also has, obviously, a subject matter expertise for coaching, whatever you're looking to hire them for.
And regarding, being an athletic director and in the climate of a lot of collegiate sports right now, and I kind of want to talk more specifically with football and the way that the college football world has just imploded, or however you want to talk about it, especially with NIL deals too. It's just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And how do we not having a football program, how does that benefit us and, make our university, our athletic department unique?
Yeah, I tell people all the time I love college football. I've been at
you
schools
are a big
that have had.
fan.
I love college football. I love the fact that we don't have it at Oakland. We've got a club team. Varsity football at the Division I level is really tough. It's expensive. It takes away from other. It just takes away from other sports.
Sure.
It's
time,
there's so much
resources.
of the pie that you can distribute in college football with 100 and some squad list. The coaches, it takes a big share of that resource pie, and it's tough to then have success in college football, but in the other sports too. And so what you see now is just cataclysmic changes. College football, like the CFP, that's outside the NCAA. So if you saw that I think it's a $1.3 billion extension of the CFP, like playoff contract. None of that money goes to the NCAA. That goes to the Power 5 conferences and the other conferences, the FBS conferences. And so there's a lot of money involved. And it's basically created this sport, which is fantastic, and turned it into I don't say it's a beast, but it's a little unwieldy at this point with some of the things that we all deal with. You deal with name, image, likeness. You deal with the transfer portal. Yeah. It just gets amplified at that level.
Yeah. Do you think, maybe some of the politics of it, and you can look, especially with this past college, football playoffs with Florida State, that was a huge thing. A lot of people weren't happy about that. And when you look at who's in the playoffs, you still have every Power 5 conference in there. Do you think there's some like political side to it where they have to represent each of those Power 5 conferences?
Yeah, you have representatives from and they're advocating, and with a 4-team playoff, and you had at the time 5 Power 5 conferences. There's one that's not making it. The expansion, I think, helps that. Obviously, every power conference, whether that's the Power 4 or the Pac-12's demise, it creates that opportunity for the conference champion, so you get less of that. But the committee has a hard job. Are you picking the best team? Had the quarterback, Jordan Travis, not been hurt at Florida State, I guarantee they would have made it. But then they have to go back and say, we got to pick what we think at the time is the 4 best players or 4 best teams to do that, and they did the best they can, but they're going to be subject to criticism. And what you see now, whether it's that or whether it's with some name, image, likeness, alleged violations at Tennessee, is you start to get state attorney generals and state legislators chiming in and making comments, which is just shows just where it's come. It's not just a university issue, it's become a state issue at the highest levels of that state's government. And that's a lot different than what it was 20 plus years ago when I started out. It's just different. And why is that? I don't want to be cynical. Probably the money. Yeah, the money and the exposure.
I mean, unfortunately, that's a lot of the times the way the world works. You know?
The money is at the point now where it is remarkable, and there's value there to it, and I understand why.
Absolutely. And I want to dive into some of these NIL deals and how it's just expanded college athletics and athletes in particular. And you can always say that NIL deals, they're there to help the athletes, right? They're there to help the athletes get representation, get some sort of compensation for their name, image, and likeness. But how does that affect an athletic department as a whole too? I can only imagine that it would also help your department.
Yeah, I think you have
teams.
You have the basic. Here are the opportunities, and I think it's great that student athletes have opportunities to, whether it's free product, whether it's $100, $1,000, whatever the market bears. That's great. Go do it. Try to, if they want to do it, that's there for them. What you see now, and I think it's been an issue for schools in the NCAA, is in the past you couldn't. It's the old duffel bag full of money. Back in the day in recruiting, you couldn't do that.
Exactly.
And now the duffel bag full of money, it isn't as important as the NIL deal. And you still can't use it as a recruiting inducement.
Correct.
But let's be honest. I mean, it's being used in that manner, whether it's on the surface, it's not. The reality is that it's being used as a recruiting inducement. And that's problematic. And schools don't want that to happen. But they're also some of the ones that are saying, hey, we want to be able to do it. And so you can't have it both ways.
Right.
What we see now more than ever, and I get it, because there's a value that these student athletes have in their mind, or maybe have in reality, is that when they're here, it's, hey, I want to have X, Y, and Z in NIL deals. And if I don't, I'm going to go to a school that'll I can, which I think they should have that opportunity to do that. But it becomes, when you were recruited to play volleyball here, the recruiting to play volleyball is only half of it now. It's the recruiting to stay. And you're recruiting, and coaches, I think now see more than ever, not only am I recruiting a new class every year, I'm recruiting my current student athletes. And it's a little different than what I think they thought they were going to get into when they got into coaching. But that's the reality of it. And the best cultures, the best programs typically are able to retain or have their student athletes stay. The ones that I think that have them leave, maybe they're going to leave anyways, but it may be more, hey, they're going to go and they're going to get more money.
Again, politics of it, you go where the money goes, right?
And I don't blame any student athlete. I'm always sitting there, it's like, you know what, if that's what they think makes the most sense, great. I mean, they've got this opportunity. I've left for countless jobs, and most of them paid me more money and gave me more responsibility. So why am I to say you couldn't do that as a student athlete with a skill set that clearly is in the very few people have, and it's in demand?
And like you said, I think it's great that they're taking advantage of that, because for so long you can argue that programs and conferences were taking advantage of certain, I don't want to say taking advantage, but of certain players in using, their name, image, and likeness to their own benefit. And it's almost like taking that power back in a sense, you know what I mean? But again, you talked about that duffel bag full of money too, or there were so many scandals of coaches paying kids to get them to go there, buying them a car, taking care of their family and stuff. And it's, I guess, where do you draw that line, or how do you prevent that from happening and saying, you come here, I'm going to get you this NIL deal?
Yeah, I don't. It's tough because you can, during the recruiting process, say, well, on average, the people on our team have $100,000. You can say what the kind of, this is what our current guys have. What you couldn't say is, hey, if you come here, I'm going to give you $250,000 your first year from an NIL deal. Yep. That's a clear recruiting inducement. Is it happening? Probably at the highest levels, I'm pretty sure it is. Right. But what you could say is, hey, we have a sophomore on the team, and on average, our guys in that class, or he's has $75,000 in NIL deals. Jeez. That's perfectly fine. Once they get here, then it's, you see where that plays out. I've always said the less regulation you have, the better it is for the schools and the people that are going to follow the rules. Because when you say you couldn't,
in what regard?
Well, when you said you couldn't do it, like, I can't give you the duffel bag of money. You're going to have people that will not do it, and they're going to be disadvantaged because they're following the rules, which they should, which we're going to do, versus the ones that aren't going to follow the rules. If you just take that rule out and provide the NIL piece of it, now it's, once you get here, we can, on average, there's a deal for $150,000 or $50,000. That evens the playing field, because that's what's permissible, and it's not a question of whether you're going to break the rule to induce someone to come to your school. It's, we all have that opportunity. It's being used, I think, on the front end a little bit. I don't think that's any question. But it's legal now for more schools to do it the right way, if they want to do it the right way.
And when, in terms of, getting those players too, and those bigger schools, they get their athletes, they have bigger NIL deals. You can look at the Power 5 schools, look at the bigger programs and stuff. Do you think that it's going to shape or change the shape of college athletics, so you start condensing, the best players at the top, and then what happens to mid-major athletics in that sense?
Yeah, on the football side, I think it's tough. If you're not in the power, and what you're going to start to see is even a stratification in the power, 4 now. The SEC and the Big Ten are going to be, just because they're going to make so much more per year in TV and media money than the ACC and the Big 12, you almost start to see stratifications within that Power 4 group, just like you see stratification between the power, kind of high major conferences in what we call mid-major conferences that already exist. You're going to start to see it within some of the high major. It exists now. The NIL deal, I always say, listen, you can, there's already differences between what the Nebraskas, the Miamis, the Ohio States, the Wisconsins, where I've worked, are able to resource than what an Oakland or other Horizon League. And that's not going to change. So they may go out to dinner on an official visit, and it's $150 per person based on the restaurant they go to, which is a restaurant that they're allowed to go to. For us, it may be $50 a person. That's just the different scales of what can happen. So it already exists. There's already an inherent advantage that they have, and more money that they have. What I always go back to, what are the basic rules of engagement or competition? Do we have some level of fairness when we actually compete against those schools? And that, to me, is the most important thing for our student athletes. It needs to be a fair fight. They may have had advantages in the recruitment and retention piece of it, but once we get on the court, we don't want to have 7 countable coaches that are coaching versus our 3.
Yeah.
So how do you figure that part of it out?
Well,
how do you figure it out?
How do you figure that out?
Well, I think if I knew, we probably would have avoided some of these challenges. I think part of it is let those schools do what they want to do.
Right. Because once you're at the top, it's...
go do your thing. But to me, it's okay. Let's have... I don't think it's fair if we can have 15 people on a squad and then a Power 5 team comes in with 30, because what happens is then they start to hoard talent. Now, with the transfer portal, you can wonder, is that talent going to start to move around? It does a little bit, but it becomes more of a challenge from a recruitment standpoint. Hey, if you want to spend more on recruiting and go more places, that's fine, but you can still only have a certain number of recruiting days or coaches out recruiting.
Yeah, and those are all rules that were set in place to prevent that sort of thing, from happening.
Yeah.
But and again, going back to some of the NIL deal stuff, we use Open Doors here at Oakland Athletics, and I can only imagine, and we touched on it a little bit too, that would be part of promotion, right? In trying to get your athletes to come here. So how have you seen it specifically impact Oakland and how we have gotten athletes to, come to campus and then commit to your programs?
Yeah, you have to have an NIL program. You need to have something. If you don't have an NIL program at your school, you're going to have a real hard time during the recruiting process, because more and more, it's been around long enough that juniors and seniors now in high school, they see it and they understand it and they know what questions to ask. So we point to Open Doors. This is your resource. I'm a big believer in educating, but each student athlete's got to figure out what makes sense for them.
Right. Educate them and let them
Here
make
it
their
is.
decision
Go to it.
Off of it.
But you have to have that platform that they can take advantage of. If you don't, or don't have something similar to Open Doors, you're going to have a hard time. And it helps our coaches in recruiting. They've got to be able to go into a house, and when a prospect says, what do you do for NIL? We have Open Doors. We have this opportunity. We're going to educate you to whatever degree that you want to leverage that service. Go leverage it, but you have to have it. I don't know of any school that doesn't. It'd be tough to recruit and retain, because that's a question you get, and you have to have an answer to it.
Yeah, and that's what it's become too. And those are a lot of the pros of it as well. But when you look at some of the drawbacks, maybe too, a lot of people say, well, it's another demand that's put on student athletes. Or then, okay, if you're paying them for name, image, and likeness, what prevents you from having collegiate athletes just be paid full salary? And then you can get into the Dartmouth decision too, where they started paying their men's basketball players a salary.
Yeah, and that's where you become. Where does it stop? And,
exactly. Where do you draw?
And where do you
line?
go? And I think the student employment that is with the Dartmouth case. And you could say, well, Dartmouth, it's a NLRB. It applies to kind of the get in the weeds. It applies to private schools, not public. We're public, but I think the rationale could apply to private schools at the Division I, II, or III levels, and it also could apply, depending on how the case law works out, to public schools. And what's interesting with Dartmouth is you could say Alabama football. They make millions of dollars. Ohio State football. Dartmouth men's basketball, my guess is, does not make enough money to cover their expenses. Well, the NLRB said that was immaterial. That doesn't make them not employees. So you can't look at how much money does a program make, at least according to the NLRB. It's about control and how much control the university at least perceives to have over the student athlete schedules and try to balance that. So are we going to get to the point where student athletes are paid? It wouldn't surprise me,
really,
especially with some level. Like with college football at the highest levels, I don't know how you, with the millions of dollars that are at play, avoid that. I think for schools like our level, it's really problematic, because if we
how do you afford it?
We can't.
You can't.
We can't.
Exactly.
We can't.
So then you think, what happens to mid-major athletics?
And that's where it becomes you're getting rid of sports. If they said you have to pay student athletes, it's unsustainable for not just Oakland, but for Wright State and others. If that's what we're asked or told to do, we just don't have it. So you either have to cut expenses, which is what we'd have to do, and then figure out a path there. And I'm not saying there's probably a lot to employment that would not be the best for the vast majority of student athletes.
Sure.
We talk transfer portal. If they're employees, my guess is that you can't transfer. You'd have a multi-year employment agreement. You're not going anywhere.
And benefits, you'd be like, are those
this
thrown
is
in there
what you
too?
get, and if you don't like it, then you're out of luck. Or if it becomes much more of what you see in a standard employment agreement. There's things I can or cannot do, things that I can get fired for doing, and things that I get as part of my agreement that if I decided I'm going to go leave for another school, there's a consequence to me. So on the surface, there could be positives. I think there could be some negatives to a lot of student athletes. And for the programs at our level, it would be the death knell to college athletics as we know it.
Yep.
It would to the point where we've got 200 or so schools like Oakland working together to find a path that makes sense for us into what we do in our resourcing at the Division I level.
Yeah.
There.
What are, and maybe you can keep this to athletic director or your personal opinion, because, you know, as a collegiate athlete myself, I have my own opinions on being paid if I were to be paid a salary. But can't you say that you are getting paid in a sense, especially if that athlete is on scholarship?
I mean, yeah, I mean, we provide the benefits. I mean, scholarships for
well, not only just the scholarships, but think the compliance people that are there to help you. You know, your athletic director who's there. If you need anything, knock on my door. You know, give me a call. Everything, academic advisors, all that kind of stuff. Would those people be there?
Probably not in the same way. And I always say, listen, some of our student athletes pay their own way to come here. Some of them get partial, some get full rides. It's all across the board. But we provide, no matter whether you pay nothing or pay everything, the same level of service.
Right.
Academics,
you're going to take
coaching, strength and conditioning. And I tell people when they get out in the real world to get personal training, there's an expense to it. It's not cheap, and to have it done by people that actually know what they're doing, and nutrition and things like that. So there are things that we provide that we should provide, and I think it's great that we provide it. It goes to the student athlete experience. I can also tell any student athlete to come here as a freshman that you have a better chance of graduating than the regular undergraduate student population. Our graduation rates are higher. My guess is if you want to get a job, you're going to have a lot of opportunities to get jobs, because I know employers love to hire student athletes, and that's part of the overall experience. And hey, by the way, we're going to also put you in a position to compete at the highest levels of Division I athletics. There's a value there. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't continue to provide our student athletes with resources and try to do as much as we can, but it really is at our level still tethered to the academic piece of it, kind of the social development, personal development piece of it.
Yeah.
Football area. With football, it's just tough with some of the numbers that come out. And I've always said it's been interesting because the two major sports in America that don't have an entrenched minor league system, and I say that like baseball, you got the minor league system. You can still go to college, but you have if you don't want to go, you can go right into minor leagues. Hockey's got the junior hockey system. Basketball and football. And so what does NCAA athletics become in a lot of ways? The minor league system for basketball and football. And that's really probably not what it was intended to be. It's just what has become of it. And that creates a lot of challenges.
Why is that?
Well, I think basketball dabbled with it. If you want to go right into the NBAs, you certainly can do that. They may still do it. Part of it is, why would the NFL want to create their own minor league system and fund that when it's been funded pretty well by
They're doing
colleges, and the colleges benefit too. I mean, it's not like a lot of them don't benefit. So it works out well for them. It's just interesting to me that with baseball, you see this minor league system that allows people to go right from high school. Hockey's a whole. I mean, hockey, you can be 15 years old and you go into juniors, and then they come to college.
You see a lot of, or skip the whole college part too. You see a lot of hockey players just go from juniors.
Yeah, you go right through it, and that was always the question when I was at schools that had hockey: is do you go major junior A or do you go college?
But the hockey world for college athletics too has really grown.
I mean, college hockey's huge.
Yes.
I mean, it's gotten more and more attention.
Yeah.
It's been interesting to see, because hockey's always had, like, they called it family advisor. The skeptic would say they were agents, but they were family advisors that could help advise the family. Oh, hey, you go junior hockey, this and that. And what you found in college hockey is it's grown and grown, and it's continued to gain so much exposure. Women's hockey too. Wisconsin, when I was there, great. They still have a great women's hockey program, but to see the growth in women's hockey, it's become more. There's a lot more attention to hockey. But with hockey, though, you have these teams that will draft the rights to a player. They still go to college, and then at some point, and it could be during the season, I saw this at Wisconsin, they'll ask that player, you're going to go pro now. And the midway through the season, they're leaving to go play for the NHL team because the NHL team owns that player's draft rights, and they've decided it's better either for the team or that student athlete's development to play professional hockey versus collegiate. And so your best player may walk out for a lot of good reasons. Hey, that's part of what comes with it. But college hockey, it's the growth of, Caitlin Clark last night.
Oh my God. Yeah.
To see the exposure and attention she got, it's awesome.
That's impressive.
It's awesome to see. But you saw that with the volleyball with Nebraska playing at Memorial Stadium. Just the growth in sports, mainly women's sports in particular, the past 5 years is really neat to see.
But I do want to just go back to, your point on when it comes to having those athletes employed. I know we're backtracking a little bit here, but you said it. It's the value in the things that we have here at Oakland. It's the value. It's the things you can't put a dollar sign on. And I think that's what makes this place so special for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, it's the people. I always say I can put a value on, because I have the budget. I can say it costs this much in nutrition and this much in staffing. I can do that. But what you can't replicate, and what I don't think anyone understands until they go here, are the people that you're going to meet, the friendships, the connections, and what you're going to leave with. And that to me is priceless.
It is.
And it's what we do, to me, better than any place else within a college setting. And you're going to do it while you compete in a sport that I hope every student athlete loves to compete in. That's what's special to me. And I think we lose sight of that when we talk about, and I know why we talk about it, the revenue, the money. It's there, but I mean, you just went through it yourself. If you talk to Patty, freshman year Patty, and senior year Patty, there's no way that you could have told freshman year Patty what it was going to be like.
Absolutely not.
And the hope is that, and it's not always the case for every student athlete, that it made a difference and it's something that you'll never forget. That's the neat part. And that's what I think you can't put that dollar value on. And I think when it becomes an employment relationship, it's just more, it's just different. It's a different relationship. And there could be some pros to that, and there's a lot of cons, I think.
I think a lot of it too, it might be just mid-major athletics too. It gives so much more opportunity to their student athletes, like what, I've been able to do, what other student athletes have also been able to do. And I think that, again, is the beauty of why mid-major athletics are the way that they are and what makes it so different and so unique in a sense. Anyone here can say I've had a completely different experience than people at, bigger schools, Big Ten schools, ACC, SEC, whatever, it's just completely different. But again, that's what makes it so beautiful.
Yeah. And I think
what makes it so nice.
And I think what we're trying to figure out at the kind of the mid-major level, like how do we get that communicated? Because so much of the public attention is on, and I get it. Michigan State, Ohio State, Alabama, they see that. I would love to have senators and Congress people come to campus and see what we do.
That would be pretty cool.
And spend time with our student athletes, see how we do what we can to provide them, see how much they're integrated into the campus, see how, as an athletic department, we're integrated with campus. And it will be different than what they would see at schools that I used to work at, in schools at that level. Not to mean that what they did at those levels isn't great or isn't meaningful. It's just different. And I think people lump in Division I schools into one big bucket, and there's a lot of differences with how we operate and our resourcing and what we try to do for student athletes and how we put them in a position to succeed.
And I think that's also sets you apart as an athletic director too. You've come from really big programs, really big schools, and you've seen how things shake out over there. And then you can come here and you can come to a mid-major school and be like, we're not going to do it like that. We're going to do it this way.
Yeah, I always tell people I've been at places where they had a lot of money, and I've learned real quick that money doesn't solve
problems.
It may help try to solve a problem, but end of the day, it's not going to be a panacea to fix everything, which I think is actually it's good to know that, because then you focus on really what the root issue is. It tends to be people, leadership, structure, organization. Those are the things that can create issues. How do you hire the best people you can with the resources you have and put them in a position to help drive the department, university forward, working with student athletes. And our student athletes, whether it was Wisconsin or Miami or Nebraska, there's a lot of similarities here. I will say our student athletes here at Oakland are so appreciative of what we're able to do, which I get, which makes me want to do more for them. Like, how can we keep trying to do more? But they're just so appreciative, and they are great ambassadors for not just the athletic department, but the entire university.
Well said.
Yeah, it's easy to say.
That was a mic drop.
Well, I get on my soapbox when I'm like, just spend time with them. If you want to feel better about where we are going in society, come spend time with our student athletes. And I get to see it, so I know you'll feel better about things. You really will. And there's some really remarkable men and women that do stuff. And there are remarkable men and women on campus that are students that aren't student athletes. I just don't have the chance to spend as much time as I do with our student athletes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I want to pivot a little bit here too to the transfer portal and how that has affected, taking schools to the next level or changing the shape. Once again, changing the shape of college athletics and how the rules have also changed within that, So how have you seen from a transfer portal perspective happening or, affecting life here at Oakland?
Yeah, I mean, it creates more or less free agency, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think it's, to me, if any student could decide to leave, if for whatever reason they're not happy, you want to have them at least pursue what they think is in their best interest.
Sure.
Go do it. I mean, life's short. You got 4 or 5 years to do this. If you don't think Oakland's the place for whatever reason, I hope you find whatever that place is. I wish you well. But it creates just a lot of turmoil and tumult. And what happens is people get into the transfer portal, and it's like musical chairs.
Oh, gosh.
There ain't no chair left. And they may give up scholarship money.
Sure.
And they may realize there's no scholarship money or not as much as they were getting at their first school, and it creates those challenges. What happened is so the NCAA during COVID, okay, you can transfer, and we're just going to, and then they put in some.
COVID year too.
The whole COVID year. Then they put in some things that you had to meet certain waiver thresholds. I think that's tough because then I think you start to, I don't say manipulate the waiver process, but what gets approved and what doesn't. I think it's tough. I'd rather just where I think they're going to end up going, just unlimited transfers. And you just have to be academically eligible. The more you transfer, you're probably going to make it tougher to do.
A lot harder because credits and transferring over.
So that may stop it, but just go. I mean, you could have someone that goes to 4 different schools in 4 years. I think that's where it's going, which I think from some of our fans, they don't get to see the student athlete come in as a freshman and
watch them
grow. But hey, that sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. I think you're also going to see it changes recruiting.
Oh my!
We're going to March Madness. When you watch March Madness, and I don't know how it's going to shape out, but look at the teams that advance the farthest and see what their kind of average experience levels are. You can become old real quick with the transfer portal. And I think experience, there's no way to coach wisdom. Those teams that have wisdom and experience have a leg up. Doesn't mean that end of the day talent still wins. So young talent's better than old, untalented people. But wisdom and experience is going to help a lot of those teams in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and when you look at that too, the big, and I don't know, and you can tell me if your thoughts on this, or if I'm in the right track or if I'm completely off track here too. But the way I see it too, within the past couple of years, with how the transfer portal has been, the big schools in the tournament in the NCAA, like the Dukes, the UNCs, all those big conglomerates that were always for who knows how long at the top. You always saw at least one of them in a Final Four, right? For I can't remember how long, but it was always those types of schools and stuff. But how has the transfer portal changed that? Has it?
It has. I think
it has.
Yeah, you're right. Because those schools back in the day, and they still do, they would get, they call them the blue chip prospects. The top basketball players are still typically going to go to Duke, Kansas, UNC, Kentucky.
Yeah, all those.
But schools that aren't at that level, that don't get those blue chip prospects, can then go get a junior or senior at a mid-major or high major that I would argue is, at least if not for that first year, but maybe first and second year, better than that blue chip prospect, because you have proof of concept. Physically, they're probably stronger. They've had 2 or 3 years of weight training and et cetera. That closes the gap. So more teams can get that. More teams are then able to compete against those teams that have that high level talent.
You can almost look at it both ways too. Like, you can condense the best, at the top, or you almost even out the playing field. And you look at, and I know we're talking specifically basketball here, you look at the FAUs that are making it far. You would have never seen that.
Yeah.
You would have never seen that before. And I think a lot of it has to do with how the athletes are staying at their schools, sticking throughout their programs, and that's what it used to be, and now it's different. And you can argue the drawbacks and the advantages for it and stuff, because when you get to that point, like if you're an FAU and you coach your team and you get to I can't remember where they Elite Eight, Final Four? I think Final Four last year, yeah. And then he takes another coaching job. How does that affect? Because if that was me as an athlete, I bought into your program too, and I'm here and I'm cheering for you and I'm for my team too, and you're my coach. I want you there. And then we do this historic thing. We get to a Final Four, and I'm not trying to, dig on him at all, because again, like you said, you go where the money goes. You go where your best opportunity is, and you can't take that away from anybody or anything at all. But as an athlete, from an athlete's standpoint, I would be like, dang.
Yeah.
I miss my coach, you know what I mean? And just seeing all of that essentially like play out. And then how does it affect athletic departments, athletic programs?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you lose a coach,
turnover,
they go. I mean, first of all, the student athletes, they may transfer or go to the coach. And certain coaches are like, I don't want to kind of raid my former school's roster, but I also don't want to prevent a student athlete that wants to go play for the coach that that he or she played for to go. I mean, just go. I mean, again, you figure it out. I mean, it's not the end of the world. So, but it's tough because you build something. You build something special. You never begrudge anybody for what they think makes the most sense for them professionally and personally, but it's never the same because they move on, and what was built. And that's why I tell folks all the time is, like, when you win a championship, the moment you walk out of that locker room, you'll never be together again.
Yep.
You'll have seniors and people leave. Yeah. That's it. And to me, that makes it difficult to enjoy it.
Yeah.
But that's what we get to do. Team. And so, in some ways, like Florida Atlantic, my guess is name, image, likeness helped them keep some of the players. And they were so good, and they already had that proof of concept. Hey, we made the Final Four. But you have that just disruption, and you're going to start to see Ohio State just fired its men's basketball coach a couple days ago. Student athletes there are wondering, what do I do? And they've got another 4 weeks in the season, and then transfer chaos ensues.
Yeah, and a lot of coaches take players with them too.
So then what's the domino then? So who's filling the Ohio State job? Where does that coach leave? And what you see, and I've always said this, is you got the impact on the coaches. They've kind of signed up for it. The student athletes, the impact, that's tough. And you hope they decided to go to the school for the school, but hey, I'm sure the coach, I hope, was a critical part of it. And then you see the coaches' families. They're the ones that are getting uprooted. It's tough, but you'll start to see that coaching carousel in high speed in the next 4 to 8 weeks.
How does that affect you as an athletic director? Let's say you're in that position, you're an AD of, a program that went that far, that did that well, and then the coaches leaves. How difficult would that be for you to make a hire? Because I could imagine you'd be sitting there and thinking, how do I go about this? Because this is such a profound program that did something. How do I fill those shoes?
Yeah, I mean, it's good and bad. One is the fact that they had success. You're going to likely have a really good candidate pool because there's proof of concept. I'll use an example here at Oakland. Lauren Karn, our softball coach, left to take the job at Maryland. Great job, great opportunity. Would have loved Lauren to stay here, but come on. I mean, it just, but
again,
it's
you're so happy
you
for
got to go. I mean, it's everything lined up. And I told her when she left, I said, listen, you've made my job easier. Because when we post the permanent position later this spring and hire it, people will see, hey, I can win a championship at Oakland. I can if I want. And I always say, we'll try to keep you here through whatever we can do monetarily to have you stay here if you want to stay here. But if I do well and I do want to go, I can. She's got a Power 5 Big Ten job. I mean, those are rare to get. Yeah. So it's going to help me. It's going to help me hire the better candidate pool I get, the harder the search is, but the better the search is, and the better I'm going to be able to get another great head coach. And that's why I don't. Hey, you've left it better than what you found it in. You help me out, and go from there.
Yeah, and you have to remember too that these coaches, they're not just coaches too. They're people. And at the end of the day, they have their own career goals. They have family. You have other things that you need to check off. And maybe sometimes, and like I said, me sitting here, I'm like, dang, that would really stink if my coach left. And that might be a selfish aspect of me to say, how could you how could you do something like that? But at the end of the day, it's just as if an athlete would leave and go into the transfer portal and, you know, find the next best opportunity for them.
Yeah. I think, I mean, the hope is you're disappointed because that meant it was a good experience.
Right.
Doesn't make it any less disappointing, but I mean, the family piece of it, closer to home, here or there. And I left, let's see, I left Ohio State, Wisconsin, Miami, in Nebraska, all thankfully, voluntarily, to take jobs at whatever that next school was.
Yeah.
And I get it. And I never begrudge anyone from doing it. And there's a lot of reasons why you do it. And you just hope that whatever they decide to do, they find happiness. And I'm looking forward to see what Lauren does. I'm just excited to see.
I think everyone is.
Yeah,
you know?
And she'll do what she'll do. Great. She gets it. She could win at a lot of different levels. And so I'm excited to see what she's able to do at Maryland with a different level of resources, but also a higher level of competition across the board. And I'm excited to see what our interim head coach here, Sam Henderson, does with a great group of women that are experienced, hungry, and are poised to do really well too.
Yeah.
So it's going to be exciting on both fronts.
If, you know, after taking all the things that we talked about today, whether it was anything, you know, athletic director, your day-to-day life related, NIL deals, you know, payment for salaries for student athletes, transfer portal fads, I mean, you name it. And this is a very broad question and a very hard question, and you might know where this one's going, but, you know, crystal ball it, where do you see, let's say, 5 years from now, the shape of college athletics?
I think you're going to see something that has the higher resource schools. I don't want to say breaking away from the NCAA, but I could see college football just
being its own entity.
Still collegiate, but I think that there'll be a way that there's some level of compensation. I don't want to say there's employees, but I think at that level I could see that happening. And then my hope is, and my expectation is, that we still are doing what we do at Oakland and other schools. The question for me is going to be, what do our championships look like? Sure. I want our student athletes, if they win in the Horizon League, to compete against every other Division I school that's earned the right to be in that championship. It might mean that these championships get expanded, so more Power 5 teams get in. I get that, as long as we get in as well. Let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah.
But I think we'll still be doing what we're doing, because I think the pessimist view of it would result in so many missed opportunities and lost opportunities, and people that would never go to college but for athletics. It would be tragic if we went down that road. And I am an internal optimist. We're not going to go down that road.
We're not going to go down.
We're not going to go down that road. Yeah.
What's the road for Oakland athletics look like? Let's say again, 5 years. What are some goals that you have for your programs and your department?
Yeah, I always talk about sustained excellence. I want our programs more often than not to compete for Horizon League championships. We do that under the current model. We're going to play in the NCAAs. How do we do that? And then for our teams that are like swim and dive, cross country, track and field, golf, the individual tennis, which there's components individual and team related. How do we position more student athletes to make the NCAA championships or the regionals that flow into the NCAA championships? So that's the whole goal. And then figure out what's important to our student athletes. I mean, there's the mental health, nutrition, all those things. How can we provide resources with what we have to continue to elevate and enhance? I always say, I mean, knock on wood, we'll win the McCafferty Trophy again this year as the best Horizon League, all sports. We've done that, I think, 6 out of the last 9 years. That's a given. How can we elevate it even more? How can we get our teams into the volleyball championship tournament? How do we get them into softball, baseball? Because as we talked about, they're getting so much more exposure doing that it'd be neat to see Oakland on TV
Get
when
up
that
there
happens.
Too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for sitting down with me. I know we really unpacked a lot.
It's been fun. I've been looking forward to it. Yeah.
I know, me too. But thank you so much for your time and, you know, commitment to doing this, because I think it's really informative and it's a different take on things. You know, you get to see inside your lens and the way that you see college athletics. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.